Welcome to The Good Pod. Today's podcast is presented by Dr. Barry Napier. If you'd like more information, please visit our website, christiandoctrine.com.
God discriminates, so should we. To discriminate is to recognize differences and to choose a path of action based on the differentiation. Today it is used mainly to bring attention to unjust discrimination, using judgmentalism or unfair reasons. It is now commonplace not to discriminate for any reason, for fear of attracting the anger of special interest groups. Yet we all discriminate every single day of our lives. It is said by some that to judge is not the same as to discriminate, but the difference is semantic rather than real. To judge is to discriminate. What do we find in Scripture? We find a God who discriminates, and he expects his own people to also discriminate. If we don't, we show disregard for his judgments, replacing them with tardy emotionalism or false reasoning. And understand this, the modern idea of stating everything in terms of love is just as false. God discriminates in terms of both love and or hate. So be careful what you say. The main thrust here is simple. What God says is absolute. What men say is not. Also bear in mind that discrimination is closely akin to judging, something the Lord commands us to do. To discriminate is to make distinctions, and to judge is to sit in judgment on something. But to arrive at discrimination, we must first make a judgment between two or more factors, and genuine judgment is always just. Take a close look at examples of just and proper discrimination in Scripture. I think I'll enumerate them to make it easier. 1. God telling Adam and Eve not to eat of a certain tree. 2. God accepting the offering of Abel but not Cain. 3. Rejecting the whole of the world population except for one family before flooding the entire earth. 4. Choosing just one family to be the founder of the Hebrew nation. 5. Choosing Joseph to save Egypt and his own kin. 6. Rejecting Pharaoh by hardening his heart as a testimony to God's power. What about 7? Commanding the slaughter of Canaanites continuously. 8. Choosing David over Saul. 9. Hating all false gods and those who worship them. 10. Commanding the deaths of wicked kings and their subjects. 11. Judging Israelites to slavery. 12. Electing a very few to salvation and the rest to hell. 13. Condemning the sexual wicked to doom and hell. 14. Condemning all false gods and religions, cults and occults today. And there's very much more. What makes any scriptural discrimination or judgment valid is not what we think, but what God says. If he says it, it is valid, logical, and acceptable. The world was made by God for his own purposes, not ours. He made it all in 6 literal days. No scientific, or rather unscientific, Big Bang, no evolution, and judges all other humanistic theories to be evil, along with those who accept and propagate them. He judges against all false religions without exception and condemns them outright. So how's that for discrimination? He condemns all people who reject his gospel, also without exception. He condemns all false preachers and religions, such as the popes, their wicked invention of the Catholic Church, and all mealy-mouthed leaders of cults and denominations. So we must judge and discriminate. Everything and everyone not of God is considered to be against him. From what Scripture says, this includes almost all people and ideas from the beginning of time. These are God's holy decisions, not ours. Thus we have no right whatever to accept or condone things and people He does not condone. As human beings saved by grace alone, we are bound to follow the Lord's lead in this matter, and cannot displace what He says with our own meagre theories. Nor may we show respect for other religions or cultures if they are not bound to God. No respect is due. In James 2:4 we read this: Are ye not then partial in yourselves, and are become judges of evil thoughts? The word partial in this text is diakrino, a verb meaning to separate, make a distinction, to discriminate, to give judgment. There is more to the meaning, but in this text it refers to bad judgment. It does not speak against judgment that is valid. The word itself consists of two parts: dia, as under, and krino, to judge. These come from a root, krai, separation. So to try to say discrimination is not judging is simply wrong. When we buy ham from a store, we first discriminate other meats and judge ham to be what we require. If I choose a shirt to wear, I do so by discounting other shirts. And when my wife used to watch me put on clothing, I could tell by her look that my judgment was rather off, so I dutifully changed the clothing. The same process occurs every day in everything. Even while writing this paper, I choose words to use based on what I believe God is saying through me. Thus I judge what is best and discriminate as I do so. To judge simply means to come to a decision. There is much more to judging, but we are all commanded to judge others. For practical purposes, to judge is to discriminate. For instance, between right and wrong, good and sin, etc. Matthew 7:1 is usually where ignorant people stick their heels in, refusing to read on. The text in its context does not warn us not to judge. Rather, we are told that we must judge well. If we judge hypocritically, we will ourselves be judged. We may not judge others to be guilty if we are guilty of the same things. The whole passage, then, is to warn us not to be hypocrites when we judge. It calls us to judge and discriminate. There is much more to say, but this podcast is sufficient to show that we are told to judge things, people, situations, etc. That is, we must discriminate. Foolish people today demand no discrimination, but God demands it. So does normal intelligence. As Christians, we must not be led into being woke. There are natural divisions in life, so let us all be biblically rational.